Welcome to the California Garden in the month of February. In today's episode, we look at all the harvests we made this month. We take a tour of the California Garden. We'll discuss some things for you to do this month. We have a Mars Hydro Grow Light giveaway. All this and a lot more in today's episode of California Gardening. So let's begin with all the harvests we made this month. Starting with broccoli. We had broccoli growing in our raised beds, and as you can see, the first few heads are quite big, and this is what happens with broccoli. The first head is the biggest, and then you can see a lot of these side florets that are growing that are not as big as the main head, but are still quite good. And we are harvesting all these beautiful florets here, as you can see. And you can look at our first harvest here. This is a beautiful looking head of broccoli. Now in just a few days, you can see some more broccoli florets growing on this plant. And this is the beauty about the broccoli plant, is that once you start harvesting, the plant will keep producing side shoots, and with just one or two plants, you can get a lot of broccoli from your broccoli plants. And once again here, the florets have grown back. You can see many more florets now. And as the plant grows, as it takes up more nutrients from the soil, it will keep growing, and it will keep growing for a long time. And once again, here is a harvest, beautiful looking broccoli. Moving on to cabbage. We had our purple cabbage or the red acre cabbage growing in two raised beds. And you can see the first harvest here, beautiful looking cabbages. These are packed with anthocyanins, which means they have a lot of nutrients, a lot of vitamins and minerals. And we had several more on our raised bed that were not ready yet, so we gave it a few days and then harvested them. And here you can see the same cabbages. They have grown quite big and are ready for harvest. You can look at the harvest here, beautiful looking cabbage heads. And once again, these are really healthy. A lot of vitamins and minerals in these cabbages. And they taste very similar to the green cabbage, the regular ones. But they do have additional beneficial nutrients in them, which is very good for you. And these cabbages do not form really large heads. As you can see, the heads are a little small. But all in all, I was very happy with the way these cabbages grew. Kohlrabi, also called the German cabbage. This is a very easy to grow plant in your home garden. And I have published several videos on how to grow this beautiful vegetable in your garden. As you can see, we had a few growing in our container. This is just a small 16-inch container. And we had several kohlrabis growing here. And as you can see, the harvest looks beautiful. These are beautiful looking kohlrabis, very delicious too. Now here's a quick tip. After we removed the kohlrabi, we added some potting mix, and now we are adding some worm castings. Now I usually get my worm castings from Vermistera, and this is not a sponsored review. I have been using their products for a long time, and they are extremely beneficial for your soil. It's a very natural product and adds back a lot of nutrients into the soil. So all in all, I really love using earthworm castings. And this is all really you need to do to replenish your soil nutrients, is add back some worm castings and then plant again. Limes. We had our Bear's lime tree growing in a container, and it has now started producing limes, as you can see. These are beautiful looking limes. And from just one plant in this container, we have started getting a lot of big size limes, as you can see. Beautiful looking limes from a very small space. Peas. A cool season crop. Peas grew very well this season. We had some growing in the container, a couple of plants, and they yielded quite a lot of peas. And I had to skip most of the peas harvest because I used to eat these right off of the plant. And the one that we had growing in the ground had taken off quite well as well. This is right in the area where we had our containers. I made some space so that I could plant a couple of plants directly in the ground. And this pea plant, as you can see, has grown quite big. And it yielded a lot of peas. So we did harvest quite a lot of peas from this plant. And these are really fresh, very delicious peas, as you can see. The harvest looks beautiful. And also these are peas that actually have pods that you can actually eat the seeds or the peas itself. Not the snap peas, but the regular peas. And you can take a full view of this plant here that's growing in the ground. It's a huge plant now. It does get full sun, and as you can see, the results are impressive. This pea plant has produced a lot of peas that we are harvesting. And look at our harvest here, beautiful looking peas, and I'm very happy with the way the peas produced this year. Moving on to radish. We were growing the Korean radish in our raised bed, and as you can see the harvest here, beautiful looking Korean radishes, quite big in size. And I was quite happy growing this radish variety this year. And also the black Spanish radish, as you can see here. The black Spanish radish is a very pungent radish, and we were growing this alongside the Korean radish. And you can see one more harvest of the Korean radish here. Beautiful looking radish. And it is one of the radish that has a classic radish flavor, a little pungent. Not as pungent as the black Spanish radish. The black Spanish radish is very pungent. But I think the Korean radish has a good balance of the pungency. So I really loved growing the Korean radish and eating it. And here are a few more. And look at the harvest here, such beautiful radishes. And I was really happy with the way these produced in the season. Spinach. We had the Indian spinach growing in a very small concrete mixing tub. Now these are very cheaply available at Home Depot and Lowe's, any home improvement centers. And I just threw in a few seeds here, kept it in a corner. And this is a very easy way to grow smaller plants like spinach without taking up too much space. They do need to have holes at the bottom, but I love using these concrete mixers for growing something like spinach. And you can look at a harvest here, beautiful looking leaves. Loved growing the Indian spinach this season. The Indian spinach has a nice buttery flavor and great taste, so we loved growing it this season. Tomatoes. We started harvesting our bush glacier tomatoes from a container, and these had been planted in December in the winter season. And as you can see, they are yielding tomatoes now. But most of the tomatoes we harvested were from our bush Roma tomato, which was growing in the raised bed. Now this was also planted in December. And I wanted to see how these tomato plants survived in the California winters. And they did quite well. I think these plants have matured exactly at the right time. We had an unusually hot February this year. The temperatures reached the 90s. And you can see here some of these tomatoes have actually ripened on the vine. And the others will ripen off the vine on the shelf. But beautiful looking tomatoes here, as you can see. And now let's begin with the tour of our garden. Starting with the raised beds. In the first raised bed, we have our onions. As you can see, they have grown quite well again this month. And they should start bulbing soon now that the daylight hours are increasing. We have potatoes on the next bed. This bed is doing okay. Not as great as the other beds that have potatoes planted. These are the seed potatoes, white superior seed potatoes. And I'm going to be planting some asparagus beans here soon. On the next raised bed, we have tomatoes. These are the bush Roma tomatoes that gave us a good harvest this season. And lots of brassicas, cabbages, cauliflowers, all inside this raised bed. You can see this purple cauliflower emerging now. It should be ready for harvest in about 15 days or so. And lots of other cabbages, as you can see. There are some carrot plants which I'm waiting for seeding. And on the next raised bed, we have potatoes, more potatoes. And this raised bed has been growing really well. All the potatoes in this raised bed, that is. We have one cabbage left, the red acre cabbage in the center. And some more potatoes. These are all different kinds of potatoes that were planted from seed potatoes. And on the next raised bed, we have kale. As you can see, the kale has grown quite well. We did harvest some kale this month. And then we have a lot of broccoli plants. And this was probably our biggest harvest for the month, broccoli. You can see some damage from the hail on the leaves of this broccoli plant. The beets are still growing. It's been very slow for the beets to grow. And as you can see, the fenugreek seeds I sowed were destroyed by the hailstorm we had. So we'll see if it comes back up again. We are preparing our tomato planting here in this bed. I'm still waiting for the 2 coldest days of this month to pass before I plant my tomatoes. So I'll be planting them in the first week of March. We have some more brassicas, cauliflowers here. And in the corner we have onions. These are the bunching onions. And that completes the tour of our raised bed garden. Let's now move on to the containers where we just transplanted this tree into this container, followed by the atomic red carrots, which have grown quite well. We then have the Surajmukhi pepper, the hot chili pepper, followed by more carrots. And then we have a couple of tomato plants that we planted just as an experiment, but they seem to be doing okay despite the hailstorm. And some asparagus beans that are planted here. They will be growing on this trellis. Taro root, as you can see, has some damage due to the hailstorm that we had. Followed by cabbages, once again not doing that well due to the hailstorm. You can see a lot of holes in the leaves. The onions seem to be doing okay. Followed by an ivy gourd plant that we just started and some Korean radish along the border of this container. The mint seems to be enjoying this weather, doing well. Some more Korean radish that you see here. Followed by a couple of tomato plants. We are planning to grow them as single stem tomato plants this season. Some collard greens, once again have some hailstorm damage. Followed by some bunching onions that have been growing here for quite some time now. And then we have our Korean radish. This is almost ready for harvest. We will be harvesting these within a week. Hyacinth bean plants are doing okay. Again, they have suffered due to the hailstorm. More hyacinth beans. These are the vining type hyacinth beans. They are doing okay. But they do have some damage from the hailstorm as well, as you can see here from the leaves. We then have the pea plant, which is now quite tall and is producing a lot of peas. And finally, we have our bush glacier tomato plant. There are a few tomatoes left on this plant, but it's towards the end of its life. And I wanted to give you a quick tour of the greenhouse. You can see here we started a lot of plants for spring planting, and most of these plants have grown quite well now. We will be beginning to plant these plants in the spring season. A lot of cabbages, kohlrabi, tomatoes, peppers. All these plants will be ready to go in the ground in the first week of March. And we do monitor the temperature and humidity, and we use a ceramic heater to heat the greenhouse at night when the temperatures are cold. And all this has been working out really well for the greenhouse. In our green stalk leaf planter, we have a lot of herbs, cilantro. We have some beets growing. We also have some spinach. And the Greenstock leaf planter has been doing a great job of helping us grow all these plants, the cilantro, beets and spinach, in a very small space. And we do have a lot of plants growing here. So all in all, I'm very happy with the Greenstock planter. And if you want to get your own, you can use coupon code CAG to get $10 off your order when you buy at greenstockgarden.com. In our classic Greenstock planter, we have a lot of onions growing. And as you can see, we are growing 30 onions in just 2.5 square feet of space vertically. And this has been working out really well. The onions have been growing well. And as the daylight hours increase, they will start bulbing out into bigger onions. They've already started producing bulbs, and the bulbs will grow bigger as there's more daylight. And now let's look at some things for you to do this month. Now if you remember, in our January episode, we discussed sowing seeds and how to germinate these seeds, get your own seedlings. And now that the seedlings are a little mature, like they're about 7 to 14 days old, it's now time to uppot them. So we'll show you the process of uppotting these seedlings into larger pots so that they're ready to go into the ground in March. So we need to start with some potting mix. So what we have here is a mix of peat moss and perlite. And what we're going to do is amend this mix with some worm castings. And we're using these worm castings to add back the nutrients in the potting mix. And that's all you really need is a base potting mix with some added nutrients for your seedlings. Now I'm going to prepare two kinds of potting mixes. This one here is a mix of peat, perlite and worm castings. I'm just going to mix it very well. Make sure that there are no large particles in the soil. And on the other side we have some bagged potting mix. Now this is just some regular bagged potting mix that I found at Home Depot. And I'm going to be using these two mixes to uppot my seedlings. Now this potting mix is a very cheap bagged potting mix that has a lot of added nutrients too. But the quality of the nutrients is not that great. So we will be amending this with some worm castings, adding back some of the nutrients that are required for the seedlings to grow. So once again, we just mix in these worm castings very well in the potting mix. And this should form a good base potting mix. And these are the seedlings that we will be uppotting. These are tomato seedlings that have grown for about 14 days now. And what we will be doing is setting up these cups. These are the big red cups that you find at Costco. And I use these because I uppot a lot of plants. And at any given time, I do have several plants. And all we really do is fill up these pots halfway through with the potting mix that we just created. And the reason we are just doing this halfway through is something you'll shortly see. The next step is to remove the seedlings from the seed starting cells. And in this case, as you can see, we have two plants. So we separate out these two plants very carefully. And you want to balance the plant very well so that it's not too deep inside. Although tomatoes can be planted deeper, shouldn't be a problem with tomatoes. But just in general, you want to make sure that the plant is well balanced in the larger pot. And then you add the rest of the potting mix on the side to support the plant well. And as you can see here, the plant is now ready to grow in this larger container. So that was the goal, to uppot all these seedlings so that they can be transplanted in the month of March outside. Alright, so the next step is to make sure that you wash the plant very well. You don't want any potting mix or any dirt on the leaves. This is very important because you don't want your seedlings to get any kind of diseases. And although this is a sterile potting mix, it's important to just wash the plant a little bit. Just hold it and then just rinse it out. And at the same time, you're also watering your seedlings. And just a few weeks later, you can see how nicely these plants have grown. They have really nice stems, nice leaves. And adding a little bit of pumice or sand on the top will keep the fungus gnats away. There's a little trick that I use to make sure that I have less fungus gnats in my greenhouse. So the next tip I want to share is how do I feed my plants nutrients every month. So I use worm tea. I find worm tea to be one of the best nutrient sources I can give to my plants. And I mix in about a tablespoon per gallon of water. I approximate it just like you see here. And then I start watering all my plants. So here you can see I'm watering the plants in my raised beds. Now the benefit of using worm tea is that it helps the plants uptake all the nutrients in the soil. Now you may have a lot of nutrients, a lot of organic matter, compost in the soil, but if your plant cannot uptake those nutrients, it's no good to the plant. So the earthworm tea helps immensely in achieving that goal, and it also helps the plant protect itself from insects and diseases. And I use worm tea on my container plants too. I think it does really well both for container plants as well as for the in-ground plants. And using worm tea is very similar to using compost tea, but worm tea has a lot more nutrients, it's higher quality, and it's really good for your plants. And how often do I do this? Well, I do this every 15 to 20 days, and I think that's quite enough for my garden. And by using this worm tea, you don't really end up using a lot of the product. It lasts you for quite a long time. So my garden maintenance routine is something that a lot of you have asked about, and this is what I do to maintain healthy plants in my garden. And if you want to get your own worm tea and worm castings, I highly recommend you check out Vermistera. They are a local company here in Southern California. The worm castings are extremely high quality. The worm tea as well is high quality. And remember, you can always use coupon code CAG on vermistera.com to get 10% off your entire order. In the gardening products section today, we will be reviewing a Mars Hydro Grow Light and also giving away one. Now, we have been using Mars Hydro Grow Lights for quite some time now, and they have usually been very high quality. And this is a new product that was sent to us by the company. And this is not a sponsored review. You can see in the package contents we have a user manual. You have the power cables, some plant hangers, and there are 2 LED drivers, and these LED drivers are actually removable. So unlike other grow lights where these are mounted on the grow light, these LED drivers are actually removable. And this is the controller, which basically lets you turn the light on and off, and also has a dimmer which will help you set the brightness of the lights. And this is the LED light itself, and as you can see, the product looks to be of a pretty good quality, very similar to the other Mars Hydro grow lights that we have reviewed. You can see here, beautiful looking grow light, and this covers a wide area. This covers an area of 3 feet by 3 feet. It's a square grow light, and they have these really interesting stickers that they ship with every product, which is interesting to see. Now the first step is to mount the LED drivers on the grow light, and the installation is very simple. The nuts have to be removed. There are nuts on the top that come off, and the LED drivers actually sit on the grooves of the bottom screws, and once you seat the LED drivers on the screws, you just tighten the nuts, and they are just hand driven nuts, very easy to use. There are 2 nuts per driver, and then finally you have the controller. Very similar, you have 2 nuts that go on each side of the controller, and that's all that needs to be done to set up this grow light. And it's very easy to mount it too. It comes with these hangers to mount them, and we used 2 hooks on the drywall to hang this grow light. And let's turn it on, and as you can see here, this will provide light to some of the indoor seedlings that are growing, some of the plants that we have potted. And you can see I'm turning on the brightness here. This is an extremely bright light, and as you can see here, I've kept it at a lower intensity because this is extremely bright. Now a few days later, I switched it out to provide some light for growing these cabbages and some pepper plants. And overall, I'm very happy with this grow light. I think it checks all the boxes of a good quality grow light, and we are giving away 1 grow light in this episode. And all you really need to do to qualify to get the grow light is what you see on your screen here. And make sure you put in a comment with what you're going to do with the grow light, and you will get an entry into the grow light giveaway. And I will be announcing the winners in the next monthly episode. So make sure that you follow the guidelines on the screen and get a chance to win this grow light. So there we have it, folks. That was our February episode for California gardening. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments box below. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening.